Hi, 5th through 8th grade. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to another computer class for remote and virtual learning. This week, we are going to be working with spreadsheets. Now, I believe that everyone who I've had previously in 5th through 8th grade has worked with spreadsheets with me before. We have talked about the purpose of spreadsheets, some of the basic terminology behind them. I'm not going to go and repeat a lot of that in an effort to try to keep this video as short and concise as possible. If for any reason you are not familiar, maybe you're new to the school, maybe you were out during the time that we talked about spreadsheets in previous years, maybe you don't remember, or for whatever other reason, I'm going to put a link in Google Classroom this week to the video that I made just today for first through fourth grade. I'm going to ask you if you think it's necessary, if you're unfamiliar, to go and watch just the first part of that video where it goes through the basic spreadsheet terminology, kind of what spreadsheets are for, and it's probably about the first 5 to 8 minutes of that video. Even though it is for the younger grades, that might help you to feel caught up, to feel knowledgeable about those basics, because we're going to get right into one simple project this week and one more advanced project next week to work with spreadsheets in Google. So, right now I have my Google main page open, and you should be there logged in as well, and we're going to start a new blank Google Sheet. You'll notice that it has that green color. That's pretty universal to Google, but also to Microsoft, because a lot of these basic Google apps that we use, Docs, Sheets, and Slides, are comparable to their Microsoft counterpoints, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And how Excel has the green icon, Sheets does too, so that even though it's by a different company, it feels a little bit more familiar. So I'm going to click on it, and then right away click on a blank sheet. There are different templates. You may see sheets here that you've worked on or worked with before, but we are going to start from scratch, a blank sheet. And we know our basic terminology is that we have these individual cells indicated by their column and row. So right now I'm in B5. Here I would be in I13, and that is important to remember. What we're going to do, and if I'm speaking a little bit quickly or I'm going a little bit quickly, you know that you can pause this at any time. Stop after a couple steps and go back. You can rewind. You can go and watch again, rewatch if you need to. But I am trying to be a little bit more quick so that the video doesn't go on as long. Because I know when they get very lengthy, some people have a hard time kind of keeping up and keeping persistent when the videos get to be an extended amount of time. So, our goal today is to see if we can use a spreadsheet, this Google Sheet, to make a customer bill. And in fact, that's what we are going to title this spreadsheet right here, Customer Bill. So imagine for a second that you are at a store, you're at a restaurant, you're at anywhere where you can purchase or buy or pay for things, and they produce something in the end that may look somewhat like a receipt. It may look somewhat like a bill at a restaurant. It may look something like an invoice. There's a couple different formats, but we are trying to replicate something similar to all of those, right? What we're going to do is type things in very plainly at first, go through the mechanics of it, the features of it, and the functions that we're going to need. And then we are going to add in some of the formatting at the end and hopefully have a finished product by the time we're done, hopefully in about the next 10, maybe 15 more minutes. The first thing that you have to decide on is what type of business this is going to be for. So use your imagination right now and think of something that interests you, something that you like, something that you think is interesting or funny or whatever. But imagine it's a video game store. If you're into that type of thing, like a GameStop. Imagine it's a pet store. Imagine it is a hardware store. Imagine it's an automotive store. Imagine it's a clothing store. Imagine it's some type of restaurant or cafe. And in fact, for mine, I am going to make mine a cafe, and it's Cafe Henderson. We're going to type that right in cell A1. So you make up something for your own. Don't type in the same thing as me. Make up something, maybe add your name into it to give it a little personal touch. But mine is going to be Cafe Henderson. I put in cell A1. And then in A2, we're all going to type pretty much the same thing. If you think for some reason that something would work better for yours than the wording I'm going to give, you could potentially type something else, but it has to make sense. It has to be pretty close. We're going to type in customer bill. And everything looks very plain for now, but trust me, we will spice it up a little bit. We will jazz it up a little bit, and it's going to look really nice by the time we're done. Then we are going to skip several lines, or several rows rather, approximately the size of a square, and we're going to go down to cell A8. Right? That's where we are going to start typing some headers for the different sections that we're going to have. So our first header is going to be item. Our second header is going to be price. Our third header is going to be quantity. And our fourth header is going to be charge. Now, what I would like is for everybody to make up the data that goes in here, and I'd like to see you put in about 8 items or 8 rows. Okay, and that is not hard. That is very simple. If you have 7, it's not a problem. If you have 10, it's not a problem. But I'm using 8 as a roundabout number. And so for mine, here's what I'm going to type in: soft drinks, mozzarella sticks, side salad. And I'm going to use a little editing magic right now so that I type these all in, but it magically appears as finished on your screen. And like that, look at that. I'm done that fast. I actually put 9 just because I felt like it. But then the next thing that we are going to do, and that falls in line with what I said, around 8. So 7, 8, 9, 10. But we don't need to go crazy and have 50. And I would like to see you have more than like 2 or 3. So 8's a good round number. Somewhere around there. Okay, so for the prices, we are also typing in prices. But for these prices, we want them to be reasonable. So if I said soft drinks, well, soft drinks, a reasonable price would be $1, $1.50. Let's say it between $1 and $3. That all sounds reasonable. You can go to a variety of restaurants where anywhere from $1 to $3 is going to be the price of a soft drink. If I said $50, that would be pretty extreme. That would be pretty rare. So I want something reasonable for each of these items. So magically, again, here we go. I'm going to snap and I'm finished and I have all my prices. Look at that. Now, noticing my prices, I put in realistic prices where they're either whole number single digits, or it can go 1 or 2 decimal spaces for if something was, say, $3.50, it's going to show up as 3.5. If I put something in as 6.75, that's fine. There's no need to go 3 decimal spaces. These would be like common ways that you would see prices written. Now, if you're going to ask, well, why doesn't this say 3.50 instead, and why does it instead say 3.5? The way that it is defaulted to format is that it will not put a 0 that's not necessary. 3.5 is the same thing as 3.50. Now, if I formatted this section differently, I could have it display that with dollar signs by it, display it with that 0, but we're not going to worry about that. For this column, we will worry about it when we get to the final charges at the end. Our next column is quantity. These are all things that you are making up in both the price column and the quantity column, but let's be realistic and let's say this is for a group of people that went out to a restaurant or a couple that went out to a restaurant. How many soft drinks? Well, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be reasonable. 117, that's just being silly. We don't need that. So I'm going to start with 5 for soft drinks. I'm going to fill in my columns and magic of editing. I'm done. And you'll notice I only put in whole numbers here because these are the quantities of each item that was purchased. So we are not going to charge for half of a soft drink, right? So the quantity is going to be a whole number. We're not going to charge for half of a salad. It's not going to be 4.5. It's going to be 4 or 5. And so I put in reasonable quantities, imagining it's a small group of people who went out to a restaurant. If you did yours for a clothing store, a video game store, you would try to make them appropriate prices, appropriate quantities, and you are making them up. It doesn't need to be meticulously researched to see how much a pair of socks is, or how much the exact price that a video game is today on the day that they're having a lot of sales and things. Let's just get something reasonable that you made up for the purposes of this spreadsheet. Now, for the charge, you are not going to do any calculating here, because here is where we see where this spreadsheet will allow us to type in a function or formula, which is really one of the greatest features or most magical features of spreadsheets, in that we can type something in that will apply a formula to exactly what we tell it to and do the calculations automatically, but also update them if anything is updated. Now, I'm starting off here in cell D9, right? That's where I want my first function or formula, and we're going to see three different ways of how to add this in. First, we can start off by simply saying, for every one of these, it's really the same thing. We want the price times the quantity. If you bought 5 soft drinks at $2 each, you're multiplying those two numbers together. So here is the way to type that in exactly and get it to produce a correct answer. You're going to type equals sum, S-U-M, parentheses open, which is shift 9, and we have B9 right here for our first number, so B9, and that's the cell B9 where that first number appears, times, and in a spreadsheet or on a computer, times is often the asterisk, which is shift 8, and then we have C9, the quantity. So I type in C9, and then I need a parentheses closed, which is shift 0. Now, if I have typed that in exactly, and this is where you really do need to be precise, be meticulous, you can't add in extra spaces, you can't add in extra numbers, you can't forget parentheses, and this is probably about the simplest equation or function that we can put in. It gets much, much more complicated than this in Excel or Google Sheets. When we're finished, if we have it all correct, if yours matches mine right now, which it should for this one, match it exactly, we press enter or return, and that is going to give us the result, the calculation. If I change that and said, oh, wait a minute, waiter made a mistake, it wasn't actually 5 soft drinks, it was only 4, then I update that quantity, and this formula or function updates automatically. That's one way we could put it in. Now let's look at one other way. We're actually going to do two other ways, because like most things in computers and technology, there's not just one way to do things. For our next calculation, where we want to multiply cell B10 with cell C10, our next item, the price and the quantity, we're going to start off the same exact way by typing equals sum, but by the time we get to even the second letter in sum, we see suggestions. I'm sure you've seen suggestions before in Google, whether it's from a Google search and it's auto-completing a suggestion for your search, whether you're typing and it's auto-completing a spelling of a word, or even sometimes predictive text to predict what you're going to type next and give you a suggestion. Here, let's look at exactly what this is saying. In this box that popped up, it's saying, here's an option to automatically put in sum B10 times C10 suggested based on cell D9. So where was that? Right here, D9, the one we already did. What Google Sheets did is say, okay, you just typed in this calculation for this previous cell above it. Now you're typing in another calculation. Maybe what you want is the exact same thing, and in this case, we do. So we're going to click on that. That's the suggestion. That is exactly what we want. Press enter, and we have the exact right answer. Again, from our function or formula, we can go back and say, oh, wait a minute, they overcharged us. We only got 1 mozzarella sticks and we shared it, not 2. So change that to a 1, it'll go to 3.5. Change it to a 3, it'll go to a 10.5. Change it back to a 2, but then say the price of mozzarella sticks, it went up just in the time that we had this meal, and it's $4 now. And you'll see that whatever you change, that function or formula will automatically calculate. It is once you click off of the cell, though, so if I change this back to 1 and I don't do anything, I leave it, I don't see that change until I either click off or use my arrow to move off of that change, that cell that I just did. And now let's look at the last and most awesome way to add in some functions or formulas. Well, I like shortcuts. I like working smarter, not harder, if you've ever seen that or heard of that saying before. All right, so Google already gave us a suggestion off of what we previously did. Well, there's a way to force that or use that even a little better. And that is to click on the last function or formula that you wrote, and if you know that the rest of these are going to follow that same pattern, there is no need to type them in over and over and over. So it followed the pattern. Multiply this cell times this cell equals the function or formula in this cell. We did the same pattern here. Well, what it does is give you the option when you have this last function or formula highlighted or selected of this little blue square that's in the bottom corner. And you see when I move my mouse pointer to it, it changes to that skinny plus sign or that skinny cross. If I put my mouse exactly over that little dot, I click and hold and then drag down, right, only to my last item, which for me happens to be in row 17, and then let go, look at what it does. Automatically, with no extra work for me, it put in that same formula for every one. Now, for row 11, it didn't say for row 11 to multiply what's in B10 and C10. It told it to multiply what's in B11 and C11 because it logically knew that for each one of these, it was multiplying what's in the same row, and it automatically completed them and did the work. So now I have my items, I have my functions and formulas that calculated their cost versus the quantity that was purchased. And this could work just as well for my example with a cafe or a restaurant as yours with a clothing store, a pet store, a video game store, or whatever you want to use. Now, here at the bottom, we're going to add in kind of a final calculation, and we're going to even include some tax. All right, so for our final calculations, we want to know what the person is going to be paying total, or the group of people in this case. So go below your last row and skip one. So if my last row I typed in was row 17, I'm going to skip 18 and I'm going to go to 19. If your last row you typed in was 18, you're going to skip 19 and go to 20. And I'm going to give it some new labels so that in this final calculation, it makes a little more logical sense in what I am going to include. I'm going to put subtotal, and I'm typing this in C19. Everybody is going to be in C. The row that you're in is going to depend on where you ended your items, but that's going to be subtotal. Underneath of subtotal, we're going to type in tax. And then under tax, we're going to type in total. Okay, so the subtotal is going to add all of these numbers together. The tax is going to tell us what the tax would be for that total. And then the grand total will add these two together. So you can start thinking in your mind what the formulas or the functions might be for each of those and how we might most easily type them in. So for subtotal right here, I need to add together everything in column D from here, row 9 to here, row 17. So let's start off with our function or formula with the same sum, or excuse me, equals sum, parentheses open. Now, I could either type this in a really easy way or I can use my click and select technique. I'm going to show both and I'll go back and then you pick which one you want to do. To type it in, I look at the first one. This is D9 and I know I go to D17. So to add them all together without having to type each one plus, 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 I'm going to type in D9 and then a colon, right? That's the shift and the key next to the L. D9 to D17. Parentheses closed, enter, and it automatically added that all together. But let me go back and do it the one other way, and you can decide which one you want to use. Equals sum, parentheses open, shift 9, and now I'm going to use my click and select technique by clicking on this first box right here in D9, dragging down. I kept the mouse button held down the whole time to D17, letting go, doing my shift 0 for parentheses closed, enter, and it gives me the same exact calculation. Two different ways to do the same thing. Now, pop quiz. Who knows what tax is in New Jersey? What is it? Don't all answer at once. Think about it. What's tax in New Jersey? Well, it gets a little tricky because, and we were talking about sales tax here, there are items that are non-taxable. So if you go grocery shopping and you just bought bread, milk, and cheese, you're actually not going to be charged tax on those items. You won't have to pay any tax because certain items are non-taxable in New Jersey. If you go to a pharmacy and buy medicine, same thing. And there are different categories of things, whether they're taxed or not taxed, but we're just going to imagine for these purposes that whatever you chose to use, we're going to say there's tax to them, just to have everybody put in the same thing. And tax in New Jersey, sales tax, is 6.625%. 6.625%. And so we need a formula or function here that's going to take this number that we have in D19 and multiply it by 6.625%. So how do we do that? It's going to require us to convert 6.625 to a decimal, and I'll just tell you guys what that is. For those of you in 8th grade, 7th grade, that is math that you should be able to do, but I'll let you know what it is. But we're going to need, again, a function or formula that multiplies. So this time we want to type in equals sum, parentheses open. Now, I'm not just multiplying two cells together before where I just typed in the cell allocations of two cells, but here I want to type in sum, whatever is in D19, and then times, which is shift 8 for that asterisk, 0.0665. Now, for most adults, that is just an easy calculation, taking 6.625% and changing it to a decimal format. And that is something that you should learn in math by the end of middle school. But if you weren't sure, that's what everybody should type in. Parentheses closed, shift 0 when you're done, enter. And that's going to tell you for $93.90, that's going to total $6.22 in tax, plus there's going to be a little bit of an extended decimal there, but we're going to do something in just a minute that will change that so that you only see it dollars and cents as you would in a regular bill. And then the grand total, really easy one. I would say at this point you should be able to type that function or formula in all by yourself and come up with it, but in case you can't, I'm going to type it in and say that for the grand total, all that we want is an equals sum, parentheses open, and this is D19 plus D20, parentheses closed. Keep in mind, I'm saying D19 and D20. If you did less items, those cells might be different for you. If you did more items, those cells might be different than you, so you need to think it through, and you should be able to figure that out. We're adding the subtotal plus the tax, enter or return at the end, and we are finished. Now, let's take care of this formatting for a second, because up here, if things didn't appear as dollars and cents, that's okay, right? But down here in our subtotal, tax, and total, we're going to make sure that we format these so that we know exactly what they should look like as currency, as money, as American dollars. So let's select those three cells for our subtotal, tax, and total, and the three numbers that we came up with. And then up here in our toolbar, we see that there's a really easy way to format it as currency or money. And it's this dollar sign icon right here. There's another format menu that gives you tons and tons of ways that you can format cells, but this is going to be the easiest that we can use right now to quickly and easily click it one time and have that appear exactly as it should. If you like for your final column right here in the charge, if you want that to be formatted as currency too, you could go do that. Either way, it's not totally necessary, but whatever makes you happy, whatever you like, that's fine. But all I'm doing there, and I'll undo so I can do it again, is selecting what I want formatted and formatting it as currency. I'm not going to do that for this quantity column because that would not make sense. It's not going to make sense because this isn't money. This isn't a dollar amount. These are quantities of items. So that takes care of all the real work. That takes care of the data, of the information, of really what's necessary. The rest is up to you to dress it up a little bit. We've talked about text tools so many times in changing fonts, changing sizes, changing colors. Adding pictures to Google Sheets is very, very similar as adding them to Google Docs, which we've done already. I will say just one note about that is that if you're going to add in a picture, you go to Insert an Image. You want to use image over cells, not image in cell. That is going to do something a little different. It probably will not produce a good result. But you know how to do that. And then last but not least, you can also do a little shading in of cells. And I'll show very quickly if I wanted to shade in, say, this header row right here. I could go up to my toolbar and pick the fill color and say I wanted that to be kind of a pale reddish color. Or actually, it's a little brown. Pale red, that could shade in cells right there, and you can use that in different ones in different patterns. And last but not least, you can also add border lines and colors. So let me say I select this whole section right here with all the items, prices, quantities, and charges, and see this tool right here. That's the border tool. I can click it, and I can decide if I want all borders, inner borders, horizontal, vertical, and so on, along with their color and their pattern if they're dotted or dashed. And I can go ahead and I can customize that to make this look however I want. So I'm going to do mine, and in just a second I'll do a little more editing magic and show you a final product, but I'm not going to take the time in the video to walk you through all that because I want you to do a little on your own, see what you can come up with, see what you can change around, see if you can make it interesting and how yours would look in the end. So ready, here we go, and with a snap of my fingers, here is my finished product. I have my entire thing formatted, a little bit of clip art, a little bit of font and color choice, shading of cells, border lines, and a happy final result. But really what matters, because all of this was just for looks, not the most important thing, what really matters is that your bill works correctly. So just for an example, let's say another person ordered a cheesesteak. I change this 2 to a 3. This number should change to what 3 times 6.75 is. My subtotal should increase, my tax should increase, and my total should increase, and everything should automatically happen because of how I set it up. So let's try it. Added another cheesesteak, changed that to a 3, and did it work? It did. It works perfectly because we put in the math, we put in the functions and formulas for that to happen. All right, so that is part 1 of a really simple project working with spreadsheets in Google Sheets. What I would appreciate is if you get finished with this, attaching it to the assignment in Google Classroom and submitting that so I can check them out, so I can see. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you did a great job, and we're going to do something again next week.